As she gains the boy's affection and the father's trust, the nanny becomes the target of increasingly dangerous sabotages. The housekeeper, consumed by jealousy and obsession, devises a plan to incriminate her and remove her for good. But when the truth begins to emerge, secrets from the past come to light, threatening to destroy everything the young woman has built. The scorching Dallas, Texas sun punished the asphalt that January afternoon. The thermometer read 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the hot air seemed to suffocate anyone who dared to venture outside without protection. In the luxurious Imperial Gardens condominium, where mansions boasted immaculate pools and gardens, a desperate scream cut through the afternoon silence. Rachel Carter, 24, was on her first day as a nanny at the Adams residence. It was an opportunity she couldn't miss. With a degree in education but no steady job for months, the position to care for little Philip 5 seemed like a gift from heaven. The salary was good and included lodging in the mansion. While organizing her belongings in the guest room, Rachel heard a muffled sound coming from the garage. At first she ignored it, thinking it was just the housekeeper Regina who had worked in the mansion for years. But the sound persisted, turning into desperate banging. "My God, what is that?" she thought as she ran towards the garage. Upon arriving, she saw something that froze her blood. Inside the black imported car, little Philip was frantically hitting against the glass, his face red and sweaty, his eyes wide with terror. Without thinking twice, Rachel looked for something to break the glass. She found a gardening tool leaning against the garage wall, and with all her strength struck the car's rear window. On the third attempt, the glass yielded, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Ignoring the cuts on her hand, she pulled the boy out. "Philip! Philip, are you okay? Please answer." Her voice trembled as she carried the almost unconscious child into the house, seeking a cool spot. The boy was breathing with difficulty, his face marked by tears and sweat. Rachel took him to the living room sofa, turned the air conditioning to the lowest temperature, and ran to get fresh water. When she returned, Philip was already able to drink a few sips, although he was still visibly shaken. "Auntie, thank you," the boy whispered, his voice weak, holding Rachel's injured hand. It was at that moment that the front door opened. Richard Adams, Philip's father and owner of the largest luxury vehicle dealership chain across inland Texas, entered the living room. Tall, athletic, and with a penetrating gaze, Richard froze at the sight, his trembling son on the sofa, and an unknown young woman with a bloody hand. "What's going on here? Who are you? What did you do to my son?" Richard's deep, authoritative voice echoed through the room. Before Rachel could answer, Regina appeared behind him, her eyes wide in theatrical shock. "Oh my goodness, Mr. Adams. I went out for 10 minutes to buy Philip's medicine, and when I came back, this woman was already here with him." The housekeeper pointed to Rachel's injured hand. "Look what she did. She must have hurt the boy too." Rachel felt her blood run cold. "No, sir, it's nothing like that. I'm Rachel, the new nanny. I arrived this morning, you weren't home, and—" She took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "Your son was locked inside the car in the garage. He could have gotten sick from the heat. I broke the glass to get him out." Richard looked at Philip, who was still pale, then at the car in the garage, visible through the living room's side window with its rear window shattered, and then at Rachel's injured hand. It was Auntie who— Philip tried to say something, but his voice was too weak to be clearly understood. "See? The boy is accusing her!" exclaimed Regina, approaching Philip with false concern. "What did this woman do to you, dear? Tell your father." Richard raised his hand, interrupting the housekeeper. His eyes now studied Rachel intently, as if trying to see beyond appearances. That young woman with wavy brown hair and honey-colored eyes didn't seem like a bad person. On the contrary, there was something in her determined yet gentle demeanor that intrigued him. "Regina, take Philip to his room and give him a warm bath. Then bring me the first aid kit," he ordered, without diverting his gaze from Rachel. "You and I need to talk, young lady." As Regina led Philip upstairs, casting furious glances at Rachel, Richard motioned for the young woman to sit down. "Now tell me exactly what happened." Rachel recounted in detail how she had heard the screams, found Philip trapped in the car, and acted instinctively to save him. Richard listened attentively, his expression serious and unreadable. When she finished, he remained silent for long seconds. I understand. But I want you to know that my son is the most important person in my life, Miss Rachel. After my wife left us 3 years ago, I promised myself that nothing bad would ever happen to him. The mention of his wife's absence did not go unnoticed by Rachel. The way he said left us seemed laden with pain, but she decided not to ask anything further. I understand, Mr. Adams, and know that I will do everything to take good care of Philip. Regina returned with the first aid kit. Handing it to Richard with a smile Rachel found strangely forced. The boy is calmer now, he's had a bath and is resting. I've prepared some tea for him. Thank you, Regina. Richard took the kit and turned to Rachel. Let me see that hand. With surprising care for someone of such a stern appearance, Richard cleaned and bandaged Rachel's hand. His fingers were firm and precise, denoting a skill she hadn't expected. I've worked with cars since I was 16. I've had my share of cuts and scratches, he explained, as if reading her thoughts. This will heal quickly, but it might be good to see a doctor. Thank you, but it's not necessary. I've been hurt much worse taking care of the children at the orphanage where I worked before. Richard raised an eyebrow. Orphanage? Yes, I worked for 2 years at the Happy Child Institute in Austin, Texas. It was my first job after college. Something in Richard's gaze shifted, as if that information had touched a sensitive spot within him. I'll give you a chance, Miss Rachel. A week's trial. If my son adapts well and there are no more incidents, we can formalize your employment. Upstairs, unnoticed by anyone, Regina overheard the conversation through the hallway, her eyes sparking with anger. She had worked in that house for 6 years, dedicating herself to Richard and Philip with absolute devotion. No intruder with pretty eyes and a touching story would take the place she had earned with such effort. Discreetly, Regina slipped into Philip's room. The boy was sleeping soundly, exhausted by the stress he had endured. She sat on the edge of the bed and caressed the child's face with false tenderness. You're like a son to me, you know? And I'll protect what's ours, no matter the cost, she whispered. Your father and I, the 3 of us will be a family. No one will get between us. Outside the mansion, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange. It was the end of Rachel's first day at the Adams residence, a day that would forever change the destiny of everyone in that mansion. The first rays of sun peeked through the curtain gaps as Rachel awoke. She was still getting used to the spacious room in the staff wing of the mansion. After the incident the day before, she had spent the night worried about Philip and anxious about her uncertain position in that house. She got up, dressed quickly, and headed to the kitchen. She intended to prepare a special breakfast for the boy, something that could win his trust. To her surprise, when she arrived, she found Philip already sitting at the table playing with a toy car. Good morning, Philip. How are you feeling today? She asked with a warm smile. The boy looked up and a shy smile lit up his face. I'm fine, Auntie Rachel. Are you staying with me today? Yes, I am. Your father hired me to take care of you, remember? Philip nodded excitedly. Cool. Auntie Regina never wants to play with me. She just keeps talking to Daddy. Rachel felt a pang in her heart as she realized the boy's longing for attention. While preparing pancakes with chocolate syrup, which she discovered was Philip's favorite when she saw his eyes light up, she talked with the boy, discovering his tastes, his routine, and his fears. And your mother, Philip? Do you talk to her? The boy's smile instantly vanished. Mommy went to live with the angels. Daddy says she's a star now. Rachel bit her lip, regretting the question. I'm sorry, dear, but I'm sure she must be the brightest star in the sky, watching over you. At that moment, Regina entered the kitchen, her face tight as she saw the intimacy between Rachel and Philip. Good morning, she said dryly. I see you're already familiar. Auntie Regina, look what Auntie Rachel made for me. Philip pointed enthusiastically at the pancakes decorated with fruit, forming a smiling face. Regina forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's nice. But don't forget to drink your milk. Philip has had immunity problems since he was little. He needs a balanced diet, she said, addressing Rachel in a professorial tone. Of course, I've already prepared his milk. I found a little chocolate powder in the cupboard and— No, Regina interrupted abruptly. I mean, the doctor recommended plain milk. No sugar, no chocolate powder. Rachel noticed something strange in the housekeeper's tone, but nodded politely. She took the glass of chocolate milk she had prepared and placed it in the sink, serving a new glass of plain milk to Philip, who made a face of disgust. After breakfast, I need to organize the day's schedule with you, Regina continued. Mr. Adams has very specific rules about Philip's upbringing. As she spoke, the housekeeper opened the refrigerator and discreetly dropped a pinch of salt into the glass of orange juice Rachel had poured for herself. The day passed with Rachel fully dedicating herself to Philip. They played in the garden, read stories, and even had a small English lesson, as the young woman had discovered the boy loved English songs. With each activity, she realized how intelligent and in need of attention the boy was. In the late afternoon, when Richard arrived, he found his son laughing as he hadn't seen him in a long time. Philip ran to his father, hugging his legs enthusiastically. "Daddy, Auntie Rachel is awesome. She taught me to say good morning in 3 languages. Bon dia, good morning, bonjour. Bambandanti to me." Richard smiled, looking at Rachel with curiosity. "I see you quickly won my son over. He's a wonderful boy, Mr. Adams, very intelligent and affectionate." Regina appeared in the living room, interrupting the moment. "Mr. Adams, I need to speak with you in the office. It's about that supplier from San Antonio, Texas." Richard nodded. "I'll take a quick shower and meet you there. Rachel, please prepare Philip for dinner. Tonight I want him to dine with us at the table." When Richard left, Regina turned to Rachel, her gaze hard. "You think you're very clever, don't you? With your degree in education, speaking other languages. But know that I've known this family for years. I know what Philip needs, I know what Mr. Adams likes, and you're just a stranger trying to infiltrate." Rachel remained calm. "I'm not trying to infiltrate anything, Regina. I just want to do my job as best I can." "We'll see how long you last," the housekeeper retorted before leaving. That night, during dinner, Rachel carefully observed the interactions between the 3. Regina served Richard with almost excessive dedication, discreetly touching his arm, smiling specially at him, almost completely ignoring Philip. The boy, in turn, kept his eyes fixed on Rachel, as if he feared she would disappear if he blinked. "So, Miss Carter, tell me more about your experience with children," Richard asked, cutting the filet mignon on his plate. "As I mentioned, I worked for 2 years at the Happy Child Institute in Austin. There I primarily cared for children between 3 and 7 years old. I helped with homework, organized recreational activities, provided emotional support." "And why did you leave there?" Regina interrupted with false casualness. Rachel hesitated for a moment. The institute faced financial difficulties and had to reduce its staff. "That's a shame. It must have been difficult to leave the children behind," Richard commented, seeming genuinely interested. "It was, yes. I formed strong bonds with them. But life goes on, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to work with Philip now." The boy smiled, proud to be mentioned. After dinner, while Regina and one of the maids cleaned the kitchen, Rachel took Philip to brush his teeth and get ready for bed. The boy insisted she tell him a story, and she couldn't refuse. "Auntie Rachel, can you sleep here with me tonight?" Philip asked when she finished the story. "I can't, dear. I have my own room, remember? But I'll be here bright and early tomorrow. It's just that I'm scared. Auntie Regina looks at me weird when Daddy isn't looking." Rachel frowned. "What do you mean, weird?" "She looks like this." Philip made an angry face. "And she talks to herself. Once I heard her saying I'm just like her." "Just like who?" "I don't know. She just says that. And then she cries." Rachel felt a chill. Something was definitely not right in that house. "Don't worry, Philip. I'll take care of you, I promise." When she finally left the boy's room, Rachel found Regina in the hallway, as if she was waiting for her. "Mr. Adams would like to see you in his office," the housekeeper said, with a cold smile on her lips. Rachel headed to the office, knocking softly on the door before entering. Richard was sitting behind an imposing dark wood desk, looking at some papers. "Did you call for me, Mr. Adams?" Richard looked up, indicating for her to sit. "Yes, please. I wanted to talk about something that happened today." Rachel's heart quickened. Had she made a mistake? "Regina informed me that you gave Philip chocolate milk this morning, even though you knew he has dietary restrictions." "No, Regina warned me after I had already prepared it, and I immediately served him plain milk." Richard frowned. "She told me you insisted, that Philip cried, and that only then did you give in." Rachel felt her face burn with indignation. "Mr. Adams, that's not true." "I can ask Philip what happened. I would never insist on something that could harm his health." Richard studied her face for a moment, as if trying to decide whom to believe. "All right, I'll talk to Philip tomorrow. But please follow Regina's instructions regarding his diet. She knows the house routine." Upon leaving the office, Rachel was determined to understand what was happening. Why would Regina lie about something so trivial? What could the housekeeper gain from it? As she walked to her room, she didn't notice the shadow moving in the dimness of the hallway. Regina watched her, a malicious smile on her lips. In her hand, a small bottle of medicine she had taken from the bathroom cabinet. The label read, "Children's sedative, prescription use only." "You haven't seen anything yet, dearie," the housekeeper murmured to herself. "This is just the beginning." 3 days had passed since Rachel's arrival at the Adams mansion, and each of those days had been marked by small accidents and strange coincidences. Milk that mysteriously soured, broken toys appearing, Philip's clothes disappearing only to reappear in improbable places. Despite Regina's constant attempts to harm her, Rachel managed to navigate each situation with creativity and patience. And the more time she spent with Philip, the stronger their bond became. The boy, once shy and withdrawn, now smiled constantly in her presence. Even Richard had noticed the change. "Philip seems like a different child," he commented that morning, watching his son play animatedly in the garden while he had his coffee. "I haven't seen him this happy since, well, a long time." Rachel smiled, feeling proud. "He just needs attention and affection, Mr. Adams. He's an extraordinary boy." "Please call me Richard. Mr. Adams makes me feel like my father." That small change in address did not go unnoticed by Regina, who served the coffee with hands trembling with suppressed anger. The growing familiarity between Rachel and Richard deeply disturbed her. As if the nanny winning over Philip wasn't enough, she was now dangerously close to her boss. Later that day, while Rachel was helping Philip with a drawing, Regina appeared at the boy's bedroom door. "Miss Carter, Mr. Adams needs to speak with you in the office. It's about next week's schedule." The tone was professional, but there was something in the housekeeper's eyes that made Rachel uneasy. "Now, Regina? We're finishing an activity." He said, "It's urgent. I'll stay with Philip." Reluctantly, Rachel left the boy with Regina and headed to the office. She knocked on the door but received no answer. Strange, she thought. She knocked again and after a few seconds turned the doorknob. The office was empty. Confused, she returned to Philip's room only to find the door locked. "Philip, Regina!" she called, knocking on the door. No response. A bad feeling washed over her. She ran to the kitchen where she found Marlene, the cook. "Have you seen Mr. Adams, Marlene?" The woman seemed surprised. "The boss left early today. He said he had a meeting in Houston, Texas, and wouldn't be back until tomorrow night." Rachel's blood ran cold. Regina had lied. Why? At that moment, she heard a muffled scream coming from upstairs. "Philip!" She ran up the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. Upon reaching the hallway, she found the boy's bedroom door open and Regina coming out, her face pale. "What happened?" "Where's Philip?" He's very strange. I think he's feeling unwell. After you left, he started to get drowsy, his speech slurred." Rachel entered the room like a whirlwind. Philip was lying in bed, his eyes half closed, his breathing slow. Philip, look at me." Rachel held the boy's face between her hands. He opened his eyes with difficulty, smiling vaguely. "Auntie Rachel, I'm sleepy. Something was very wrong." Philip had been perfectly fine minutes before. Rachel quickly scanned the room and noticed a half-empty glass of juice on the bedside table. "What did you give him?" she demanded, turning to Regina. "Just orange juice, as always." "I don't know what happened. Maybe he's sick. I'll call the doctor." Regina left quickly, leaving Rachel alone with Philip. The nanny picked up the glass of juice, sniffing it discreetly. She didn't detect anything strange, but something told her this wasn't normal. She decided to take Philip to the bathroom, where she helped him wash his face with cold water. The boy remained lethargic, but seemed a little more alert. "Philip, dear, do you remember what happened after I left the room?" The boy frowned, making a visible effort to concentrate. "Auntie Regina, she gave me juice and some candies. Said it was a secret." Rachel felt a wave of anger. "What kind of candies, Philip?" "I don't know. They were small and white, bitter." At that moment, Regina returned with Marlene. "Dr. Charles is coming. He said to keep Philip awake." Rachel nodded but couldn't take her eyes off the housekeeper. There was something in her behavior, an anxiety that went beyond concern for Philip's well-being. While waiting for the doctor, Rachel kept Philip awake, talking to him, making him walk around the room. Slowly, the boy regained lucidity, though he was still visibly tired. When Dr. Charles arrived an hour later, Philip was already better, but still drowsy. The doctor examined him carefully, asking Rachel several questions about the symptoms. "It seems to be just extreme fatigue," the doctor finally concluded, "but I'll run some tests to be sure. For now, let him rest and observe if there's any change in symptoms." After the doctor left, Regina insisted that Rachel rest a bit, offering to stay with Philip. But the nanny refused to leave the boy. "I'll stay with him. You can go prepare dinner, Regina." "We'll be fine." The housekeeper had no choice but to leave, casting one last displeased look at Rachel. When they were alone, Rachel checked the bag she had left in Philip's room before leaving. Something bothered her. She rummaged through the bag and noticed that her makeup case was in a different position. She opened it and, to her horror, found a small bottle of medicine hidden among her personal items. "My God," she whispered. Reading the label, "Children's Sedative, Prescription Use Only." Everything became clear at that moment. Regina had drugged Philip and hidden the medicine in her belongings to incriminate her. But why? What was that woman's goal? Rachel put the bottle in her pocket, determined to confront Regina later. For now she needed to focus on caring for Philip. The boy slept peacefully for a few hours, under Rachel's watchful eye. When he woke up around 7 in the evening, he seemed almost recovered, though still a little subdued. "Auntie Rachel, don't leave, okay?" he asked, holding her hand tightly. "I'm not going anywhere, dear. I promise." Regina appeared at the door, carrying a tray with soup and juice. Her gaze quickly darted to Rachel's bag, half open on the armchair. "How is he?" she asked, placing the tray on the nightstand. "Better, thank you." "I'll help him eat. Why don't you rest a bit? You've been here for hours. I can feed him." "I prefer to stay, Regina, but I appreciate the offer." The tension between the two women was palpable. Philip looked from one to the other, sensing the heavy atmosphere, even without fully understanding what was happening. After dinner, when Philip was sleeping again, Rachel went down to the kitchen to return the tray. She found Regina alone, organizing the cupboards. "We need to talk," Rachel said, closing the kitchen door behind her. Regina turned slowly, her face a mask of innocence. "About what?" Rachel took the medicine bottle from her pocket. "About this. I found it in my bag after Philip started showing strange symptoms." The housekeeper paled for a second, but quickly regained her composure. "And what does that have to do with me? If it was in your bag, it's obviously yours." "We both know it's not mine, Regina. The question is, why would you do something like this? Why drug an innocent child just to harm me?" Regina took a step forward, her face contorted in an expression of hatred that finally dropped the mask. "You don't understand anything, do you? You think you can just come here with your pretty face and your sad stories about orphanages and win everyone over? I built a life here, 6 years dedicated to this family. Richard and Philip are my family." The intensity of the declaration left Rachel speechless for a moment. There was more than simple professional jealousy. There was a dangerous obsession. "Regina, what you feel doesn't justify putting Philip's life at risk. Don't be dramatic. It was just a small dose for him to sleep a little. I just wanted Richard to see that you're not trustworthy, for him to realize that you make mistakes like anyone else. This is crazy. I'm going to tell Richard everything as soon as he gets back." Regina let out a bitter laugh. "Do you really think he'll believe you? A stranger he's known for less than a week? Against me, who's been by his side for 6 years? Who supported him when that bitch of an ex-wife abandoned him with a small child?" Rachel was about to reply when the house phone rang. Regina answered quickly. Her expression changed as she recognized Richard's voice. "Yes, sir. Everything's fine now, but we had a small problem with Philip today. No, nothing serious. Drowsiness, a little mental confusion. Dr. Charles came and said it seemed like just fatigue, but—" Regina paused, casting a triumphant look at Rachel. "Well, sir, we found a bottle of children's sedative in Miss Carter's belongings. No, she denies it, of course. Yes, sir, we're monitoring Philip closely. Tomorrow night? All right, we'll be waiting." When she hung up, Regina's smile was pure malice. "He's coming back tomorrow night." And he wants to talk seriously with you. Rachel felt a knot in her stomach. The situation had become terribly complicated. It was her word against Regina's, and the housekeeper clearly had the upper hand in that house. "This won't stand," Rachel promised, leaving the kitchen with firm steps. That would be a long night. She decided to sleep in Philip's room to ensure Regina wouldn't try anything else against the boy. As she watched the child sleep peacefully, Rachel thought about how to prove her innocence. She couldn't give up now. Not just for her job, but mainly for Philip, who was finally starting to trust her. Across the hallway, Regina also didn't sleep. Sitting in the dimness of her room, she stared at an old photograph where a woman very similar to Rachel smiled next to a young man. With hatred, she scratched out the woman's face with a red pen. "History repeating itself," she murmured to herself. "But this time the ending will be different." The next morning brought a heavy atmosphere to the Adams mansion. Rachel had spent the night in Philip's room, sitting in the armchair near the bed, observing the boy's restless sleep. Around 5 in the morning, she finally succumbed to exhaustion and fell asleep. She was awakened by Philip's gentle touch on her arm. The boy was already up, completely recovered from the previous afternoon's episode, watching her with his big brown eyes. "Auntie Rachel, did you sleep in the chair?" "That's not comfortable," he said with the innocence characteristic of children. Rachel smiled, pushing her hair away from her face. "I wanted to be close to you to make sure you were okay." Philip hugged her tightly. "I knew you wouldn't leave." Those simple words brought tears to Rachel's eyes. How to explain to a 5-year-old child that she might have to leave that house soon? That she had been unfairly accused of something terrible? "Shall we have breakfast?" "I'm hungry," Philip announced, already pulling her by the hand. In the kitchen they found only Marlene. Regina had not yet come down, which was unusual, as the housekeeper was usually the first to wake up. "Good morning, Marlene. Is Regina still sleeping?" The cook shrugged. "She left very early. Said she had things to resolve in the city and would be back before lunch." Rachel felt a pang in her stomach. What was Regina planning now? After breakfast, she took Philip to play in the garden. The day was exceptionally beautiful, with a clear blue sky and a gentle breeze that softened Dallas's typical heat. As she watched the boy run after a ball, Rachel tried to formulate a plan. She needed to convince Richard of her innocence, but how? Without concrete proof, it would be her word against Regina's. Around 11 o'clock, the sound of a car parking at the mansion's entrance caught her attention. Strange, she thought. Richard wouldn't be back until night. She took Philip's hand and walked to the main entrance. To her surprise, it was Richard who got out of the car, his expression serious and tired. Upon seeing his son, he offered a brief smile and bent down to embrace him. "Daddy!" "You're back early," Philip exclaimed, hugging him tightly. "Yes, champ. I finished my commitments early and decided to come back right away to see you." His eyes met Rachel's, and there was something in them that she couldn't decipher. It wasn't anger, as she expected, but a kind of confusion and sadness. "Miss Carter, can we talk in the office, please?" Rachel nodded, her heart racing. "Of course." "Philip, go play in your room for a bit. I'll come get you for lunch together, okay?" The boy looked from Rachel to his father, sensing the tension in the air. "Will Auntie Rachel stay with me afterwards? She promised to teach me origami today." Richard hesitated. "We'll see, son. Now go, please." When Philip went upstairs reluctantly, Rachel followed Richard to the office. He closed the door behind them and indicated for her to sit. "Regina told me what happened yesterday," he began, sitting opposite her. "About the medicine found in your bag." Rachel took a deep breath. "Mr. Adams." "Richard, I swear I didn't give Philip any medicine. That bottle was placed in my bag to incriminate me." Richard studied her for a long moment. "Why would Regina do that?" "Honestly, I believe she's obsessed with you and Philip. She sees me as a threat to the position she's built in this house. From day one, she's been trying to sabotage me in various ways. Those are serious accusations, Rachel. I know, and I wouldn't make them if I wasn't sure. Philip told me Regina gave him small white bitter candies yesterday, before he started feeling unwell. When I confronted the housekeeper, she practically admitted she had drugged the boy to harm me." Richard stood up, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of evident frustration. "This sounds crazy. Regina has been with us for 6 years. She's always been extremely dedicated." "Precisely. Perhaps too dedicated." Have you ever stopped to think why no nanny lasts more than a few weeks in this house? Philip told me they all leave soon. That seemed to hit Richard like a lightning bolt. He stared at Rachel with wide eyes. How do you know that? Philip told me. He said he gets sad because whenever he starts to like someone, they leave. Richard walked to the window, looking out at the garden as he digested that information. It's true. We've had 4 nannies in the last 8 months. They all resigned, citing personal problems or incompatibility with the job. Or perhaps they were sabotaged until they gave up, Rachel suggested softly. A heavy silence fell over the room. Richard seemed to be processing a painful revelation. When he finally turned to Rachel, there was a new determination in his gaze. There's something you need to know about Regina. Something that might explain her behavior. Rachel waited, sensing she was about to discover a crucial piece of that puzzle. Regina was my wife, Amanda's, nurse during the last months of her life. Amanda had aggressive cancer and left us when Philip was only 2 years old. Regina was extraordinary during that period. She stayed with us day and night, caring for Amanda with a dedication I had never seen. When my wife passed, Regina was our support. She helped me care for Philip, reorganize the house, and move forward. Rachel felt a lump in her throat. The story was moving but also revealing. Do you think she developed feelings for you during that time? Richard nodded slowly. I always suspected, but I never encouraged it. I kept our relationship strictly professional. Regina is an excellent housekeeper and seemed to love Philip, so I thought it would be best for everyone to maintain the current arrangement. I understand. But that doesn't justify what she did. No, it doesn't. Richard seemed decided now. I'll talk to her as soon as she returns. As if summoned by the conversation, they heard the front door open. Regina had returned. Rachel and Richard left the office and found the housekeeper in the foyer, carrying some bags. Upon seeing them together, Regina visibly paled. Mr. Adams, I didn't expect to see you so soon. We need to talk, Regina. In the office, please. The woman cast a look of pure hatred at Rachel before following Richard. Of course, sir. Rachel went upstairs to be with Philip, but she couldn't concentrate on the origami she had promised to teach him. Her mind was downstairs, imagining the conversation between Richard and Regina. About 20 minutes later, she heard shouting coming from downstairs. Philip looked at her, startled. Auntie Rachel, what's happening? I don't know, dear. Stay here, I'll check. I promise I'll be right back. Upon reaching the top of the stairs, she saw Regina storming out of the office, her face contorted in a mask of fury and humiliation. You won, you busybody. Are you happy now? You destroyed everything I built in this house. Rachel remained calm even as the housekeeper advanced towards her. I didn't destroy anything, Regina. You did that yourself when you decided to put Philip at risk. Don't play the saint. Do you think I don't see how you look at Richard? How you try to win Philip over? You want to take my place, you want my family. They were never your family, Regina, Richard said, coming out of the office. You were a valued employee, a friend in difficult times, but I never gave you reason to think beyond that. Regina laughed, a bitter laugh full of pain. Of course not. It was always her, wasn't it? Even after she left, even after everything I did for you, it was always Amanda. And now this girl appears with the same sweet, determined way, and you fall like a lovesick teenager. Rachel then realized what was happening. Regina saw a resemblance in her to Richard's deceased wife, and this fueled her hatred and jealousy. Regina, enough. I am extremely disappointed with your actions. Drugging my son to incriminate a colleague. That is unforgivable. He's my son, too. Who was by his side when he had a fever? Who wiped his tears when he cried for his mother? Who decorated his room? Who knows all his preferences? A movement on the stairs caught everyone's attention. Philip was standing at the top, his little eyes wide with fear. Auntie Regina, why are you shouting? You're scaring everyone. Regina looked at the boy, her face softening instantly. Philip, dear, it's nothing. Just a misunderstanding between adults. You put medicine in my food yesterday. You made me very sleepy, and then you put the medicine in Auntie Rachel's bag. I saw you. The silence that followed those words was almost palpable. Regina looked as if she had been slapped, staring incredulously at the boy. No, dear, you must have dreamed that. I would never... I saw it, Auntie Regina. You took that medicine Daddy keeps in the tall cabinet in the bathroom, and then when Auntie Rachel left, you put it in my water. And you said it was our secret. Richard looked at Regina as if seeing her for the first time. Get your things and leave my house now. Richard, please, I can explain. It was a moment of weakness. I just wanted to... Now, Regina. Or I'll call the police. The housekeeper looked at everyone in the room one last time before going upstairs towards her room. Philip ran to Rachel, hugging her tightly. Did I do well to tell, Auntie Rachel? I didn't want to make Auntie Regina sad, but she did something wrong. Rachel hugged him back, feeling immense relief and pride in the boy's courage. Yes, dear. You did very well. We should always tell the truth, even when it's hard. Richard approached the two, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. I'm proud of you, champ. That was very brave. An hour later, Regina left the mansion. As she passed Rachel, who was on the veranda with Philip, she paused for a moment. Her gaze was no longer one of hatred, but of deep sadness mixed with something that seemed like resignation. You think you won, she said in a low voice. But you don't know the whole story. You don't know who I really am or who you really are. And before Rachel could ask what that meant, Regina got into the waiting taxi and left. That night, Richard, Rachel, and Philip had dinner together in a strangely light atmosphere. It was as if a weight had been lifted from that house, allowing everyone to breathe freely for the first time. Rachel, Richard said, while Philip played with his toys on the living room rug after dinner, I want to apologize for doubting you, and I want to formally offer you the full-time nanny position. Rachel smiled, feeling a wave of relief. I accept, Richard. Thank you for your trust. The look they exchanged at that moment said much more than words could express. There was the beginning of something new, a possibility neither of them had considered until then. But as the Adams mansion prepared for a new phase, across town, in a hastily rented small apartment, Regina unpacked a single suitcase. From inside, she carefully removed a photo album. She opened it to the first page, where a woman identical to Rachel smiled next to a young man. You may have won today, Rachel Carter. Or should I say, Amanda's niece? She murmured to herself, caressing the photograph. But this is just the beginning. 2 weeks had passed since Regina's departure, and the Adams mansion had transformed into a much lighter and happier home. Philip was visibly more cheerful. His behavior had improved at school, and even his episodes of nocturnal nightmares had drastically decreased. Rachel, now officially hired as a full-time nanny, had established a pleasant routine for the boy: educational activities in the morning, playtime in the garden in the afternoon, and always a story before bedtime. Each day the bond between them grew stronger. It was also impossible to ignore the growing closeness between her and Richard. It had started with small moments: a shared coffee after Philip fell asleep, a prolonged conversation in the garden while watching the boy play, a casual touch of hands during dinner. Nothing had been declared, but the glances exchanged between them conveyed feelings that words could not yet express. On that sunny Saturday morning, Richard had taken Philip to watch a Dallas Dragons football game, their favorite team. Rachel decided to use her free time to tidy her room and organize some educational materials she had bought for future activities with Philip. She was folding some clothes when she heard the doorbell ring. Strange, she thought. They weren't expecting visitors that day. She went downstairs and opened the door. A middle-aged woman, elegantly dressed in a grey pantsuit, smiled politely at her. She had grey hair pulled back in an immaculate bun and a leather briefcase under her arm. Good morning. I'm looking for Miss Rachel Carter. That's me, Rachel replied, intrigued. How can I help you? My name is Claudia Miller. I'm a lawyer. I represent Mrs. Beatrice Oliver, who was a nanny in this house approximately 8 months ago. Rachel felt a chill down her spine. The name wasn't familiar to her, but something in the lawyer's serious expression put her on alert. Would you like to come in? I'm alone at the moment. The masters of the house are out, but we can talk in the living room. I appreciate it, but I prefer our conversation to be brief and private. I'm just here to deliver this. The woman extended a plain brown envelope without identification. My client asked that it reach your hands directly. What is this? A letter. And I must warn you, the content may be disturbing. My client insisted that you read it alone and draw your own conclusions. Rachel took the envelope with hesitation. I don't understand. Why didn't your client come personally? The lawyer adjusted her glasses, looking momentarily uncomfortable. Mrs. Oliver is unavailable at the moment. Health issues, but she became quite agitated when she learned, through acquaintances, that a new nanny had been hired by the Adams family. Before Rachel could ask more questions, the woman handed her a business card. If you need to speak with me after reading the letter, I am at your disposal. With that, she turned and walked back to the car parked in front of the mansion. Rachel closed the door, the envelope weighing in her hands as if it contained lead. She went up to her room and sat on the bed, staring at the envelope for a few minutes. Finally, she took a deep breath and opened it. Inside were 3 handwritten sheets of paper, in delicate but firm calligraphy. Dear Miss Carter, you don't know me, but I know you, or at least, I know the position you now hold. My name is Beatrice Oliver, and I was little Philip's nanny approximately 8 months ago. I lasted only 3 weeks in the Adams home, before being forced to leave under circumstances I prefer not to detail in this letter. I learned from mutual acquaintances that you have taken on the permanent nanny position, and that Regina has finally left the mansion. If this is true, you must have already noticed part of the problem, but I fear you are only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Regina is not just a housekeeper obsessed with her employer, as you probably thought. She carries much darker secrets, secrets involving Amanda Adams herself, Richard's late wife. During my short stay at the mansion, I accidentally discovered a diary belonging to Amanda, hidden in a false drawer in the master bedroom. In it, Amanda expressed growing fear of Regina, who was her private nurse during her illness. According to her writings, Regina had developed an obsession not only with Richard, but with the idea of replacing Amanda as wife and mother. Even more disturbing, Amanda suspected that Regina was altering her medications, intentionally prolonging her suffering. I was never able to confirm these suspicions, nor show the diary to Richard, as Regina found it among my things before I could act. What happened next was a campaign of psychological terror. Regina accused me of theft, planted evidence against me, isolated me from Philip and Richard. When I tried to confront her about the diary, she simply laughed and said, "No one would believe you. This is my family now." I left the Adams mansion afraid and deeply disturbed. I tried to move on with my life, but Amanda's words continue to haunt me. And now that I've learned of your employment, I feel a moral obligation to warn you. Regina will not give up easily. She will investigate your past, look for ways to discredit you, and do everything to reclaim what she considers hers by right. And I fear she may go beyond simple sabotage. My lawyer has a digitized copy of the most relevant pages of Amanda's diary. If you wish to see them, please contact her. Perhaps you can do what I could not. Protect Philip and Richard from this truly dangerous woman. Take care, and more importantly, take care of them. With sincere concern, Beatrice Oliver. Rachel let the letter fall onto her lap, feeling a mixture of horror and confirmation. Regina's last words before leaving, "You don't know who I really am," now took on a much more sinister meaning. She reread the letter twice, trying to absorb all the implications. If what Beatrice said was true, Regina was not just an obsessed employee, but possibly a woman capable of much more serious actions. And most disturbing, she could be planning something against Rachel at this very moment. She picked up the lawyer's card and was about to call when she heard the front door open. Richard and Philip had returned. "Rachel? Where are you? We have a surprise." Philip's excited voice echoed through the house. She quickly put the letter in her bedside table drawer and went downstairs, trying to compose a normal expression. "I'm here." "How was the game?" Philip ran to hug her, wearing a new Dallas Dragons jersey. "We won 3-0. It was amazing. Daddy bought ice cream afterwards and—" Richard watched the scene with a smile, but his expression changed when he noticed something on Rachel's face. "Is something wrong? You look pale." "It's nothing," she lied. "Just a slight headache. Nothing an aspirin won't fix." Richard didn't seem convinced, but he didn't insist. "Philip, why don't you go put away your new game souvenirs while I talk to Rachel?" When the boy went upstairs, Richard approached her. "Now tell me what really happened. I know you well enough to know when something's wrong." Rachel hesitated. Should she show him the letter, tell him about Beatrice's suspicions, or would it be premature, perhaps even dangerous, without concrete evidence? "Richard, if I told you something?" "Disturbing. Something that could change your perception of people who were important to you. Would you believe me? He frowned, taking her hands in his. What's going on, Rachel? You're scaring me. Before she could answer, the doorbell rang again. Richard went to answer it and returned accompanied by a tall, middle-aged man wearing a simple suit. Rachel, this is Paul Rivers. He's a private detective and, well, he has something important to tell us. The detective greeted Rachel with a firm handshake. Miss Carter, it's a pleasure to meet you, although the circumstances are not the best. What do you mean? She asked, feeling that something very bad was about to happen. Richard indicated for everyone to sit down. Paul was hired by Regina to investigate your past, but he's an old friend of my family and decided to warn me about what he discovered. The detective opened a folder he carried. Miss Carter, Regina hired me approximately 10 days ago. She was determined to find something compromising about you. Initially, I found nothing but an impeccable record. A degree in education, volunteer work, employment at the orphanage. But then, following her specific instructions, I deepened the investigation in Austin where you worked. Rachel felt her blood run cold. She had a terrible premonition about what was coming next. And I discovered something that I believe Regina already suspected. Your real surname is not Carter, but Noguera. And you are the niece of Amanda Adams, Mr. Richard's late wife. A heavy silence fell over the room. Richard looked at Rachel with an expression of complete shock, as if he were seeing a ghost. Is it true? He finally managed to ask, his voice almost a whisper. Rachel felt her eyes fill with tears. Yes, Amanda was my mother's sister. I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid you would reject me without giving me a chance. Why? Richard's voice was laden with suppressed emotion. Why did you approach us using another name? It wasn't premeditated, she explained, tears now flowing freely. After my parents separated, my mother reverted to her maiden name, Carter, and I adopted that name too. When I saw the advertisement for the nanny position, I recognized your name, but I wasn't sure if you would know who I was. Amanda and my mother didn't keep in close contact after her marriage to you. But why didn't you tell me later, when you realized who I was? I was afraid, Rachel confessed. At first, I just wanted to get to know Philip, my aunt's son whom I never had a chance to see grow up. Then, when I started to fall in love with you and love Philip as if he were my own, I feared that the truth could ruin everything, that you would think I had ulterior motives. Richard ran a hand over his face, visibly shaken. All these months, you let me believe you were a stranger. The detective cleared his throat, appearing uncomfortable with the family drama he had unleashed. There's one more thing you need to know. Regina wasn't satisfied with just that discovery. She wanted something more compromising, and that's when I discovered she had visited Rachel's former employers in Austin at the orphanage. What did she do there? Rachel asked, though she already suspected the answer. From what I gathered, she spoke with the director and some staff, asking very specific questions about an incident that occurred 3 years ago, involving a child under your care. Rachel closed her eyes, feeling as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Gabriel, she whispered. Exactly. A 4-year-old boy who suffered an accident while under your supervision. Regina managed to access internal reports and is building a very specific narrative about what happened. One that portrays you as negligent or worse. That's absurd, Rachel exclaimed, standing up. It was a terrible accident, but the investigation concluded that there was no negligence on my part. Richard looked at her with an expression that mingled confusion, pain, and something that looked like distrust. What accident, Rachel? What is he talking about? The detective intervened again. Mr. Adams, before jumping to conclusions, I believe you should hear Miss Carter's, or Noguera's, full version. And I must warn you, Regina plans to use this information to discredit Rachel before you and possibly before the law, if necessary. She is, as far as I can tell, determined to drive her from this house at all costs. Richard stood up, his face pale. I need to think. This is too much to absorb at once. He turned to Rachel, and there was something in his eyes that deeply hurt her doubt. Please stay with Philip until I return. We need to talk later, alone. He left quickly without looking back. Rachel sank onto the sofa, devastated. Everything she had built in the last few weeks seemed to be crumbling around her. The detective watched her with a compassionate expression. "I'm sorry to be the bearer of this news, miss. For what it's worth, I believe Regina is manipulating the facts for her own ends. In fact, now that I've fulfilled my moral duty to warn you, I intend to discontinue my services to her." He stood up, handing Rachel a card. "If you need any help clearing your name or protecting yourself from her machinations, don't hesitate to contact me. I recognize a good person when I see one." After the detective left, Rachel slowly climbed the stairs towards Philip's room. The boy was playing happily, oblivious to the drama unfolding under the same roof. "Auntie Rachel, come see my new car Daddy bought." She forced a smile, sitting next to him on the rug. "It's beautiful, dear." Philip noticed her sadness even though she tried to hide it. With the surprising intuition children sometimes demonstrate, he took her hand. "Don't be sad, Auntie Rachel. Daddy said you'll never leave like the other aunties. He promised." The boy's innocent words were like a knife to her heart. "Sometimes, Philip, even wanting very much to stay, people have to leave." "But you promised," he protested, his eyes filling with tears. "You said you'd teach me to ride my bike without training wheels on my birthday." Rachel hugged the boy tightly, allowing herself to cry silently where he couldn't see her face. "I know, my love. I know." Richard drove aimlessly through the streets of Dallas, trying to organize the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions that assailed him. The revelation that Rachel was Amanda's niece had been an unexpected blow. Why had she hidden it from him? And what was that story about an accident with a child? He parked the car in front of Oakwood Park, where he used to take Philip on weekends. He sat on an empty bench, watching the families enjoying the late afternoon. Couples holding hands, children running, grandparents proudly watching their grandchildren. Scenes of normality that now seemed so distant from his own life. The similarities between Rachel and Amanda, which had previously only subconsciously intrigued him, now made perfect sense. The same gentle smile, the same silent determination, the same way of tilting her head slightly when listening attentively. How had he not noticed before? His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was the detective, Paul. "Mr. Adams, I apologize for bothering you, but there's something important I forgot to mention. Something I discovered this morning that might change your perspective on this whole situation." Richard felt a pang of apprehension. "What is it, Paul?" "About the incident at the orphanage. I spoke with the director and other staff, and the story Regina is building is completely distorted. The boy Gabriel had a congenital heart condition. On the day of the accident, Rachel was supervising him in the yard when she received a call informing her that her mother had suffered a stroke. She stepped away for literally 2 minutes, leaving Gabriel sitting on a bench. When she returned, the boy had collapsed. "My God," Richard murmured. She immediately called for help and began first aid procedures, but the boy's condition was serious. He was taken to the hospital, where he was hospitalized for days. The family initially blamed Rachel, but the official investigation concluded that it was an episode related to the child's pre-existing condition, not negligence. The boy recovered completely. Richard closed his eyes, suddenly feeling exhausted. Why would Regina manipulate this story? "Mr. Adams, I believe we are dealing with someone potentially dangerous. I also discovered that Regina falsified documents to get a job in your house. She was never a registered nurse, as she claimed. She was only a nursing assistant and was fired from her previous job for inappropriate behavior with patients." A chill ran down Richard's spine. "What else did you find out about her?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "It's best if we talk about it in person. Can I meet you in half an hour?" "Yes, I'm at Oakwood Park. Meet me here." While waiting, Richard tried to process everything he had discovered in the last few hours. The woman he had trusted to care for his son and his home for 6 years was a complete stranger. And Rachel, whom he thought was just a young nanny, was actually part of his family, a link to Amanda he never expected to find. Paul arrived promptly, sitting next to Richard on the park bench. "Thank you for coming," Richard said. "What else did you find out about Regina?" The detective took a tablet from his folder and showed Richard some photos. "These are copies of letters found in the apartment Regina recently rented. The landlady allowed me in when I showed my identification." Richard looked at the images with growing uneasiness. They were letters written by Regina, never sent, addressed to Amanda. The tone of the messages was disturbing. They began as declarations of admiration, evolved into possessiveness, and ended in veiled threats. She was obsessed with my wife. From what I could gather, yes, and when Amanda passed away, that obsession was transferred to you and Philip. Regina created a fantasy where she would assume Amanda's role in every way. And Rachel. Regina probably saw her as a threat from the start, not just because of the physical resemblance to Amanda, but because subconsciously she must have perceived the kinship. Perhaps something in Rachel's behavior aroused her suspicions. Richard shook his head, stunned. What should I do now, Paul? First, protect your family, Rachel included. Regina is unpredictable and feels cornered, which makes her potentially more dangerous. I need to go home. Philip and Rachel, I'll go with you, just in case. All the way back, Richard thought about how unfair he had been to Rachel. He had judged her prematurely, allowing Regina's insinuations to plant seeds of distrust. Now he understood why Rachel had hesitated to reveal her identity. The fear of being rejected, of not having the opportunity to get to know her aunt's family. Upon arriving home, he found Philip having dinner alone in the kitchen, served by Marlene. "Where is Rachel?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm so as not to alarm his son. "She's in her room, sir," Marlene replied. "She seemed very sad. She asked me to serve the boys dinner because she wasn't feeling well." Richard went upstairs quickly, with Paul right behind him. He knocked gently on Rachel's bedroom door. "Rachel, can we talk?" There was no answer. He knocked again, harder this time. Silence. With a bad feeling, he opened the door. The room was empty. On the bed, an envelope with his name handwritten on it. He opened it with trembling fingers. "Richard, when you read this letter, I will already be far away. I cannot continue here knowing that I have lost your trust. The way you looked at me today, it broke me inside. Yes, I should have told you that I am Amanda's niece. It was wrong to hide it from you. But everything else I felt and experienced in this house was genuine. My love for Philip, my growing affection for you, my desire to be part of this family. Regarding the accident at the orphanage, Gabriel was a wonderful boy with a serious heart condition. On that terrible day, I received a call saying my mother had suffered a stroke. In a panic, I stepped away for minutes, leaving Gabriel sitting on a bench in the yard. When I returned, he had collapsed. I did everything I could to save him, and thank God he recovered completely. But the feeling of guilt never left me. That's why I've always been so protective of Philip. I saw in him a second chance, an opportunity to do things right. Perhaps it was selfish of me, but I never, ever put your son at risk. I know Regina will do everything to destroy me, but the truth is that she is the only dangerous person in this story. Perhaps you already know that now, perhaps not. Either way, I cannot stay and watch the destruction of everything we have built. Tell Philip I love him very much, and I'm sorry to break my promise to teach him to ride his bike without training wheels. With love, Rachel." Richard let the letter fall, feeling devastated. "She's gone," he murmured. Paul picked up the letter, reading it quickly. "How long ago?" Richard checked his watch. "I left about 3 hours ago. She must have left soon after." "Do you have any idea where she might have gone?" "I don't know. Maybe to her mother's house. She mentioned her mother had a stroke a few years ago." Paul nodded. "I'll investigate. In the meantime, I suggest you beef up security at this house. We don't know how Regina will react when she finds out Rachel has left." That night, after putting Philip to bed, a painfully difficult task, as the boy cried for Rachel, Richard sat in the office, mentally reviewing all the events of the past few months. How could he have been so blind? How had he not noticed Regina's increasingly possessive and manipulative behavior? And why hadn't he seen the similarities between Rachel and Amanda before? Now they seemed so obvious. His phone rang again. It was Paul. "I found something, Mr. Adams. Rachel took a bus to Austin, Texas a few hours ago. I got her mother's address, Mrs. Helen Carter. Are you writing this down?" Richard quickly wrote down the address. "I'll go there tomorrow morning. I can't let her disappear like this. I have one more piece of information that might be useful. While investigating Rachel's whereabouts, I discovered that Regina also bought a bus ticket to Austin, departing tomorrow at dawn." Richard's blood ran cold. "She's following Rachel." "It seems so. And there's more. I found newspaper clippings about the Adams family in her apartment. photos of you and Philip taken without your knowledge, and even a detailed dossier on Amanda and her illness. Her obsessive behavior goes far beyond what we imagined. I need to warn Rachel. I tried calling her number, but it's off. I suggest you leave for Austin as soon as possible. I can keep an eye on Philip if you want. Richard hesitated. He didn't want to leave his son, especially after Rachel's sudden departure, but he also couldn't ignore the potential threat Regina posed. I'll wake Philip and take him with me. I can't risk leaving him, even under your protection. No offense, Paul. I understand perfectly. In that case, I suggest you leave tonight. I can accompany you to Austin if you prefer. Thank you, but it will be faster if it's just Philip and me. They'll wake him, and we'll leave immediately. Half an hour later, Richard was driving down the highway towards Austin, with Philip sleeping in the back seat, hugging his favorite teddy bear. The boy had briefly woken up when his father put him in the car. Asking sleepily if they were going to see Auntie Rachel, Richard said yes, and the boy went back to sleep, with a small smile on his lips. As he drove through the night, Richard couldn't stop thinking about how his life had been turned upside down in just one day. He had discovered that the woman he had trusted for years was a dangerous imposter, that the young nanny who had recently entered his life was his late wife's niece, and that both were now on a collision course. And in the midst of it all, there was his heart, which in recent months had begun to open again to love. After years closed in mourning for Amanda, Rachel had brought light and joy back into his home, not just for Philip but for himself. The thought of losing her was unbearable. We'll find her, he murmured to himself, accelerating slightly. And this time I'll make everything right. In Austin, in her mother's small apartment, Rachel cried silently, watching the fine rain begin to fall outside. Helen Carter slept in the next room, still frail from the stroke she had suffered 3 years prior, but stable. Rachel thought of Philip, imagining how the boy would have reacted to her sudden departure. Guilt consumed her for breaking her promise never to abandon him, but she sincerely believed it was the best thing to do. Richard would never trust her again, not after discovering she had hidden being Amanda's niece. I should have told him from the start, she murmured to herself, wiping away tears. I was a fool. Her phone, which she had kept off throughout the trip, seemed to call to her from the nearby table. Part of her wanted to turn it on, see if there were any messages from Richard, any sign that he had forgiven her. But the fear of rejection was greater, unaware that, a few miles away, Regina was planning her next move, and that Richard was on his way with Philip. Rachel finally succumbed to emotional exhaustion and fell asleep on the sofa, dreaming of the family she believed she had lost forever. Morning came, bringing a clear sky after the early morning rain. Rachel awoke to the sound of birds singing at the window of the small apartment. For a moment, disoriented by sleep, she looked for the elegant curtains of her room in the Adams mansion, until reality hit her like a punch. She had left everything behind. She got up from the sofa, her body aching, and walked to the kitchen. Helen, her mother, was already awake, preparing a simple coffee. "Good morning, daughter," said the middle-aged woman, whose features vaguely resembled Amanda's, although years and illness had left deep marks on her face. "You slept on the sofa all night. Why didn't you go to bed?" "I didn't want to bother you, Mom," Rachel replied, kissing her forehead. "How are you feeling today?" "Much better since you arrived. But I'm still worried. You never properly explained why you left that good job in Dallas." Rachel sighed, sitting at the table. "It's complicated, Mum. Let's just say they found out who I really am." Helen frowned. "You mean Richard found out you're Amanda's niece?" "Yes, and he didn't react well." Her mother gently took her hand. "Daughter, what did you expect? You approached that family using another surname, hiding your true identity. Of course he would be disturbed. It wasn't quite like that. At first, I wasn't even sure if it was the same Richard Adams who had been married to Aunt Amanda. And then, when I confirmed, well, I was afraid. Afraid of being rejected, of not having the chance to meet my aunt's son. I understand your fear, dear, but secrets have a nasty habit of coming out at the worst possible times." The sound of the doorbell interrupted the conversation. Helen got up with some difficulty. "It must be Mrs. Inez, my neighbor. She always brings fresh bread on Saturdays." Rachel remained seated, distractedly stirring her coffee cup. She heard muffled voices in the living room, and then silence. Moments later, her mother returned to the kitchen, her face pale. "Rachel, someone wants to talk to you. It's not Mrs. Inez." Before she could ask who it was, Richard appeared at the kitchen door with a sleepy Philip in his arms. The boy, upon seeing Rachel, immediately woke up. "Auntie Rachel," he cried, extending his little arms towards her. Rachel stood up, stunned, as Richard placed Philip on the floor. The boy ran to her, hugging her legs tightly. She knelt down, hugging him back, tears already streaming down her face. "I missed you, Auntie Rachel," Philip murmured against her shoulder. "Why did you leave without saying goodbye?" I'm so sorry, dear," she managed to reply, her voice choked. Helen, sensing the intensity of the moment, gently took Philip's hand. "Hello, young man. I'm Helen, Rachel's grandmother. How about you help me make some hot chocolate while these two adults talk?" Philip looked at Rachel as if asking for permission. "Go with her, dear." "I promise I'm not going anywhere," Rachel assured, trying to control the tremor in her voice. When they were alone, Richard finally spoke. "Why did you run away, Rachel?" She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "You know why. The way you looked at me yesterday, there was so much distrust, so much hurt. I thought you would never forgive me. I needed time to process everything. It was a shock to discover you were Amanda's niece, that you had hidden it from me for months. I know, and I'm sorry. I should have told you from the start." Richard took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "Yes, you should have. But I also made mistakes. I allowed Regina's insinuations to plant doubts in my mind. I doubted you when your only crime was fearing rejection." There was a moment of silence between them, laden with unspoken emotions. Finally, Rachel found the courage to ask, "How did you find us?" "Paul, the detective. He found out where you had gone and—" "Rachel, there's something you need to know. Regina bought a ticket to Austin, departing this morning. Paul believes she intends to find you." Rachel's face paled. "My God. My mother. Don't worry." Paul alerted the local police. "They're watching the bus station and have a detailed description of her. That won't stop her. She's determined." Richard nodded gravely. "We've discovered many disturbing things about her in the last 24 hours. Paul found a true shrine dedicated to my family in her apartment. Photos, newspaper clippings, even a diary where she fantasized about replacing Amanda as my wife and Philip's mother." Rachel sat down again, stunned by the revelation. "That explains a lot. The immediate hostility, the sabotages, the obsession with driving me away. There's more. Regina was never a registered nurse, as she claimed. She was only an assistant and was fired from her last job for inappropriate behavior with patients. And yet you hired her to care for your sick wife." Richard lowered his eyes, guilt evident on his face. "She falsified references. I was desperate at the time. Amanda needed constant care, and Philip, so young, needed stability. Regina seemed like a gift from heaven, competent, dedicated, willing to live with us. I never properly checked her background." Richard's phone rang, interrupting the conversation. He answered quickly. "Paul? Yes, we're all fine. We found Rachel." "What? Are you sure?" "I understand. We'll be careful. Thanks for the warning." Hanging up, his face had paled. "Regina wasn't on the bus she was supposed to take this morning. Paul thinks she might have driven or found another means of transportation." "Does she know where my mother lives?" "Possibly. If she had access to your personal documents at the mansion, she might have found this address." At that moment, Helen returned to the kitchen with Philip, both smiling. The boy proudly carried a mug of hot chocolate. "Look, Auntie Rachel, I helped make it." Rachel forced a smile, not wanting to alarm the child. "It's wonderful, dear. Thank you very much." Helen immediately noticed the tension in the air. "Is something wrong?" Richard exchanged a meaningful look with Rachel. "Mrs. Carter, we need to consider the possibility of leaving here for a few hours. There's someone who might pose a risk to Rachel." "What person? What are you talking about?" Helen seemed confused and scared. "Mom, remember the housekeeper who worked at Richard's house? Regina, she's not a stable person. We're afraid she might come here." Helen sat down, visibly disturbed. "My God, but where would we go? I can barely walk long distances since my stroke." "We can go to a hotel," Richard suggested, "just for a day or two until the police find her." As they discussed the possibilities, Philip, who was distractedly playing on the kitchen floor, suddenly pointed to the window. Look, it's Auntie Regina. Everyone froze. Richard ran to the window but saw no one. Are you sure, Philip? Yes. She was looking here, but then she left quickly. Richard immediately called Paul, informing him of the possible sighting. He's sending a patrol car here, he said, hanging up. In the meantime, let's get ready to leave. In the following minutes, a sense of urgency took over the small apartment. Rachel helped her mother gather essential medications, while Richard kept Philip distracted, but always vigilant for any suspicious movement outside. The doorbell rang again, making everyone freeze. Wait here, Richard said, cautiously heading to the door. Through the peephole, he saw 2 police officers. He opened the door with visible relief. Mr. Adams, we're from the civil police. We received an alert about a possible stalker in the area. Richard let them in, quickly explaining the situation. The officers suggested that everyone stay inside the apartment while they conducted a search of the surroundings. One of them would remain posted at the door to ensure the family's safety. Hours passed without any sign of Regina. The initial tension began to give way to a resigned weariness. Philip had fallen asleep on the sofa, exhausted from the trip and the commotion. Helen was preparing a simple lunch in the kitchen, assisted by the police officer who had remained on guard. Rachel and Richard sat on the small balcony of the apartment, watching the street below. The silence between them was laden with unspoken words. Rachel, Richard finally began, regardless of all this, there's something I need to say. She turned to him, noticing the seriousness in his gaze. In recent months, you've brought life back into our home. Philip is happier than he's ever been since Amanda left us. And I am too. Rachel felt her heart quicken. Richard, let me finish, please. When Paul told me you were Amanda's niece, I was shocked, confused. But then, when I had time to process everything, I realized it explains so many things. The instant connection Philip felt with you, the familiarity I myself felt without understanding why. It wasn't just coincidence or destiny. It was blood, it was family. He took her hands in his. I didn't come all this way just to protect you from Regina. I came because I realized I can't lose you, that Philip can't lose you, that in some way I can't explain, you complete our family. Tears streamed freely down Rachel's face now. I felt that too from the first day, as if I was already part of you, as if I was coming home after a long journey. Richard leaned in slowly, resting his forehead against hers. Then come home with us, to your true home. The moment was interrupted by the return of the second police officer. Mr. Adams, Miss Carter, we have news. Regina was apprehended about an hour ago, trying to enter the building through the back. She had a syringe containing a potent sedative in her bag. Rachel paled. My God! She will face charges for stalking, attempted home invasion, and possession of a controlled substance, for starters. Considering her history and the evidence found in her apartment, it's likely she'll be detained for a long time. A huge weight seemed to lift from everyone's shoulders. Helen, who had heard the news from the kitchen, came into the living room visibly relieved. So it's over. We're safe? Yes, ma'am, the officer replied. You are safe now. Philip woke up with the movement in the living room, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Are we going home now, Daddy? Richard looked at Rachel, a silent question in his eyes. She smiled, the answer clear in her gaze. Yes, champ. All of us are going home. 2 weeks later, the Adams mansion had returned to normalcy, or rather to a new normalcy. Rachel had moved in permanently, occupying a larger room next to Philip's. Helen, at Richard's invitation, had also come to live with them, settling into a comfortable suite on the ground floor, adapted for her post-stroke needs. The relationship between Richard and Rachel evolved naturally, without haste. Both knew they had all the time in the world now. Philip, to everyone's delight, seemed happier than ever, having not only his Auntie Rachel back, but also gaining a loving grandmother. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, while Helen and Marlene prepared a barbecue in the garden, Richard and Rachel watched Philip trying to ride his bike without training wheels for the first time. You're doing it, dear. Just a little more, Rachel encouraged, running alongside the boy. Philip pedaled with determination, his tongue clamped between his teeth in concentration. When he finally managed to balance himself for a few meters, his little face lit up with a radiant smile. I did it. Daddy, Auntie Rachel, look, I did it. Richard applauded proudly, but his gaze was fixed on Rachel, on her smile, on her genuine joy for Philip's achievements, on her evident love for the boy. At that moment, he made a decision. He discreetly took a small velvet box from his pocket that he had been carrying for days, waiting for the perfect moment. "Rachel," he called softly, making her turn to him. When she saw the small box in his hand, she brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes wide. "I know it might seem rushed to some, but to me, to us, it feels like we were destined for this from the beginning. You brought light back into our lives. You completed our family in a way I never imagined possible again." Opening the small box to reveal a delicate diamond ring, he knelt on the grass. "Rachel Carter Noguera, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife and officially Philip's mother?" Before she could answer, Philip abandoned his bike and ran to them, hugging Rachel's legs. "Say yes, Auntie Rachel. Then you'll be my real mom." With tears of happiness streaming down her face, Rachel bent down to hug the boy, then looked at Richard, still kneeling. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Richard placed the ring on her finger and embraced her, along with Philip, forming a small circle of love and hope. Helen, watching the scene from the veranda, wiped away a tear. Beside her, Marlene smiled. "Finally, this house has a real family," the cook commented. "Yes," Helen agreed, thinking of her sister Amanda. In some way, it seems she planned all this, as if she sent Rachel to care for the two men she loved most. In the garden, the three remained embraced, illuminated by the afternoon sun. Philip, always curious, suddenly asked the question many adults would be afraid to ask. "Auntie Rachel, when you marry Daddy, will you still be my auntie, or will you be my mom?" Rachel looked at Richard, seeking support, then turned to the boy, carefully choosing her words. "I will be whatever you want me to be, Philip. I can continue to be your Auntie Rachel, or I can be your mom in your heart. The name doesn't matter as much as the love we feel." The boy thought for a moment, with the typical seriousness of children when considering important matters. "I think I want a mom. All the other kids at school have one." "Then I will be your mom," she replied, hugging him again. "And I promise to love you every day of my life, even when I make a mess, even when you make the biggest mess in the world. And will you leave one day, like my first mom?" A heavy silence fell upon them. Richard seemed speechless, struggling to find an adequate answer to such a difficult question. Rachel, however, held Philip's little hands and looked directly into his eyes. "Philip, all of us one day will have to go somewhere else. That's the law of life. But I promise you that, as long as it depends on me, I will stay by your side for all the days I can, loving you, caring for you, and watching you grow to become the incredible man I know you will be." The boy seemed satisfied with the answer, hugging her tightly. "I love you, Mom Rachel." The words, spoken with such naturalness and conviction, brought tears to the eyes of everyone watching the scene. Months later, in the garden of that same mansion, Rachel walked down a path of white petals towards Richard, who awaited her under an arch of flowers. Philip, impeccable in his small suit, carried the rings with comical seriousness. When it was time for the vows, the boy surprised everyone by taking the microphone and declaring, "I want to say something. Mom Rachel is the best mom in the world. She saved me from the hot car and never left me again. Now we're a real family. I love you, Mom Rachel." There wasn't a dry eye at the ceremony when Rachel and Richard sealed their love with a kiss, while Philip hugged their legs. That family, formed not only by blood ties, but mainly by choices of love, finally found its happy ending. And as in every good story, this was not really an end, but the beginning of a new journey together. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Rachel, Richard, and Philip has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking on your left. If you enjoyed this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the power of love. Don't miss our upcoming content. We look forward to reading your comments and knowing what you thought of this emotional American tale.